So, continuing with the series, I'm going to be doing a live reading of The Banner of the Broken Cross and the Storm of the Worlds. This is continuing on with the next section, which is Chapter 1, which is titled A Demon from Our Past. So without further interruption, here we go. There was a world much like our own, which fell under the dominion of the eighth king of hell. His rule was cruel, and his power was immense. In his control was like the weight that seized the hearts of his victims, forcing those under his dominion to do unimaginable things. And there was war which finally reached North American shores. For the past 25 years, the Dominion had ruled and controlled every aspect of life, forcing all to swear fealty to the dreadful King of Hell and the God they served, known only as the Dark Mother. Christian Ehrlichman lived in this world in Ontario, working every day at a labor camp. He would board a train with hundreds of other weary workers, building a monument to Peter, the man who had brought the religion and teachings of the Dark Mother, known as the Magisterium, to the world. The only part of his life that brought Christian solace were the dreams he had. He had dreams of a dark and tumultuous, stormy sea, and a woman with fiery red hair and bright green eyes who waded in these waters. His heart accelerated as he woke up from the dream, and the dreams never left the forefront of his mind. Although these dreams would grow fainter, they grew into a faint memory which became bitter in light of his everyday experiences. His soul was wounded, and he was not sure for how much longer he could continue the life he was living. In a way, he thought his life must be a nightmare and the dreams were actually reality. Shaken from his dream, Christian got out of bed and gazed out at his room. The only light was a small candle in the distance. On the wall was his personal graffiti, poems he had written on the walls, having nowhere else to write them, mostly concerning his dreams, but they were all drawn with much haste. There were pictures, too, of all the things he had experienced. The dreams comforted him at night, but tormented him during the day. The woman from his dreams tormented him, her face seared with a fiery hot flame into the deepest part of his mind. She was always there, present in his dreams. She was in all of these dreams, and he knew deep down that if there was any meaning or anchor to the universe, that his place was by her side. In New York, not far away, there lived a young woman named Natalie Gabler, who worked at the same labor camp. Natalie was fast asleep, stirring in her dreams, wading through the waters of the storm of the worlds, watching with terror as the flashes of lightning crashed all around her, opening portals to other worlds, but just briefly revealing glimpses inside. The sound of thunder reverberated through its expanse. In her dreams, she had a longing and a connection to a young man she knew she had never met, but knew was real with a certainty that she could not explain. Christian and Natalie lived in the same world, which now was, to their knowledge, completely controlled by the dominion of the Broken Cross. It was all either of them knew. They had never known a life of freedom. The eyes and ears of the dreadful king were everywhere. He had seared his sigil into the arms of his slaves, marking them as his own. No one knew the extent of the power and the true nature of the demon who ruled over them all, except for the elites of the religion. The sun was rising, and Christian got up with dread in his heart, having no choice but to prepare for the bitter day of forced labor that awaited him. And not many miles away, Natalie did the same. The labor camp was towered over by thick walls and iron gates, which stretched the entire circumference of the labor camp. The constant smell inside the camp was that of sweat, mixed with the despair of the men and women who toiled under the slavery of the demon that ruled over them all, always being watched by the guards of the Dominion. As the sunrise began, Christian made himself ready for another day of labor. He found it impossible to be ready mentally, but he did make sure that he was fully awake. Each day was filled with back-breaking labor. as Christian carried large objects to help construct the monument. In his mind, he constantly wondered if he was made for more. The image of the red-haired woman always in his mind. He always wondered about his dreams and wondered if they were indeed some kind of vision. Not far away, Natalie was working in a factory at the same labor camp, her eyes gazing up toward the sky. She had a secret, though. Every waking moment she experienced with time to her own thoughts, she spent searching for the banned works of poets and writers that flourished before the Dominion took control, but now were impossible to find, due to their works being banned. Many of them had been executed in what was once Europe, when the Dominion first took control. She discovered the forbidden writings of a man we know well in our world, but in this world, this different world, when the Dominion took control of England, he was executed for his poetry, for his mockery of the Dominion, and for his refusal to conform to what he saw as madness. These words were powerful, but forbidden as drugs were. His name was William Shakespeare, viewed as an eternal enemy of the Dominion. She relished over his words and was always delving for new meaning in their beauty and in the wisdom that filled his words. Days soon turned to weeks, and the weeks drifted away until months had passed. And both Natalie and Christian would constantly look forward to every night as a new opportunity to have dreams and to draw closer to something unknown to them, yet familiar and divine. Something inside Christian urged him with the thought that his paths would cross with the woman from his dreams. And this thought was the beginning of a journey that would change everything in his world. But there would be immense challenges ahead, and an insane sacrifice that would test their spirits' faith and devotion, even unto death. The sun vanished below the horizon, and the creaky gates of the labor camp opened, which meant that the grueling day was over. Christian exited to the side that led to Canada, and Natalie was on the other side and exited to the side that led to New York. They boarded separate trains and thought about their experiences, dwelling and ruminating on the meaninglessness of their brief existence on a planet ruled by forces that never had their best interest at heart. Christian wondered if there could ever be a greater purpose. Christian followed in amongst the throng of other weary workers and boarded the dirty and old train that took the workers back to their living quarters. The train's engines roared to life and came to life, the carriages of the train jerking forward, as the camp disappeared into the distance and the passengers groaned from their weariness. However, the strength inside Christian began to grow. As the train rolled on, Christian looked out at the world beyond the labor camp. The landscape was full with dirt and blackness. Towns run down, which had once been bustling with people and activity. The dark clouds hovered over the camp, shrouding it in darkness, which covered a black landscape, which mirrored the darkness of the Dominion's spiritual power. Such sights, though very familiar, still sent shivers down Christian's spine. In a way, this world was foreign to him, and did not seem like his home. The train came to a halt, and Christian and many other weary workers departed the train. When Christian came closer to his front door, he was greeted by booming and relentless voices of the magisterium priests who were preaching a gospel of hellfire, which brought despair within Christian's heart. They preached in the streets, often traveling to different towns. None but the most fervent devotees of the magisterium religion looked forward to their presence. Their words were not only focused on fire and brimstone, but also strict calls to obedience to the life-consuming teachings of their religious regime. Christian averted his gaze casually and rushed into his room, hoping to escape their presence. Overwhelmed and exhausted completely from the day's labor, Christian soon cascaded into a deep sleep. The room around filled with water pouring in through the windows until the room disappeared completely, and all that was left was the tempestuous landscape and mighty waves and terrifying oceans of the storm of the worlds. Lightning flashed, and with a strike illuminated portals to many other worlds. Suddenly, in this time, the storm brought him to a place unlike any he had ever seen. Christian was now standing on a grassy hillside, from which he could see multitudes of people gathered into a crowd surrounding a man who stood on top of the hill. He spoke with a gentle and quiet authority, and his words reverberated through the air and continued to echo in the hearts of those who listened to him, filling their very souls with peace and hope. Christian did not know who this man was, but he would describe him only as the teacher. The teacher's voice rose above the murmur of the crowd as he began to speak and teach with gentleness and power. Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are those who mourn, for they shall be comforted. Blessed are the meek, for they shall inherit the earth. Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they shall be filled. Blessed are the merciful, for they shall obtain mercy. Blessed are the pure in heart, for they shall see God. Blessed are the peacemakers, for they shall be called children of God. Blessed are those who are persecuted for righteousness' sake, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Christian blended himself into the crowd and listened intently, warm feelings flooding and spreading throughout his body. The hope within his veins had all culminated in this moment. He knew that in the words of the teacher he found the anchor of all of history and the image of what really mattered, a profound truth and a light meant to pierce the darkness. But even this vision began to fade, and unavoidably, Christian fell through the storm of the worlds again, and found himself back in the small room where he slept, the light of the dawn suddenly creeping through the cracks in the walls of his small living quarters. The memory of the words of the teacher stayed with him, in his heart refusing to leave, giving him a greater purpose, and even more than that, a will to live. He knew that this vision was the key to unraveling all the lies that dwelt in the darkness and the power and authority, the dominion that took away the freedom he craved and suffocated him under its overwhelming grasp. And then we switch scenes to 110 AD, our world, England. It's basically a medieval scene. So, the War of the Consuming Fire was over. Thomas and his armies were defeated. With Thomas's defeat, the essence of the dreadful king of hell was disembodied but captured, but only temporarily. Barb Prophet, the mighty warrior and leader, stood before a council of wise men and women from all across the world. The war against the dreadful king of hell had brought together an alliance of nations from all across the world, who came together to defeat him. The air in the room was heavy, and there were important decisions to be made. With the dreadful king defeated, the alliance had to decide what to do with his disembodied essence, lest the dreadful king should rise again and bring untold harm and torment to the world again. He nearly succeeded in destroying it, when he realized that he was unable to enslave it. The council members, each from various different cultures and nations, argued with each other over the best way to move forward. One of the rulers from Egypt suggested destroying the essence, but the king of the Arabian peoples warned that attempting to do so had dire consequences, stating that doing so would only anger that devil. One of the English lords argued for locking it away in a secure location. However, the wise Bard Prophet reminded them that even the most well-guarded vaults and prisons can be breached with a carefully planned attack. No, stated Bard Prophet. Our solution lies elsewhere. I have been granted the ability to travel between worlds by God himself. His statement was declared with confidence and no one questioned it. What we should do is send the essence of the eighth king of hell to another universe, where he will be unable to even dream about threatening our world again. And once he is there, we must bind him there, and he will never escape. The council chamber was filled with nervous ripples of whispered anxiety as the members struggled to contemplate the deep implications of the suggestion. Some saw clear wisdom in Bard Prophet's words, while others feared that sending the demon to in the other universe could have disastrous consequences upon the poor souls that might reside in that realm. The debate began with a whisper and blew over into harsher words between the members of the council, and then to whirlwinds of fierce argumentation. Each council member that spoke was fixed in their opinions about what was best, while even fewer weighed the risks and rewards of both options. At long last, Bard Prophet spoke up, silencing the debate. There are universes that serve no other purpose than to be spiritual prisons. Many of these universes I have had the displeasure of traveling to myself. This is the best solution we have been looking for. Bard Prophet said the words confidently, but deep in his heart, there was a fear that told him something might go wrong. Regardless of his internal thoughts, the crowd was convinced now of a solution. Despite a few quiet murmurs, and the agreement was made, as Bard Prophet uttered a silent prayer in his mind in hopes of quelling his anxieties. His heart was heavy with the weight of his decision, not sure if the feeling was that of deep regret or something else. The safety of so many lives now lay upon his shoulders, but he was prepared to leave the council chambers while carrying the essence of the demon with him, in hopes of providing safety and a lifetime of peace to our world. Just as the council was about to disband, there was a creak on the council chamber's doors, and in strode the wayward prince, with a wide grin on his face. Some sighed and put their forehead in their palms of their hands as he strode into the room, his flamboyant demeanor and presence on full display. He strolled across the room, announcing that he would like to say a word to the council. He began to speak. A sarcastic grin across his face which drew the attention of every soul in the room. You all have landed yourself in quite the pickle. I hope you don't mind me pointing out the obvious, Wayward Prince said in a playful and almost mocking tone. I do have some experience with such pickles, you see. My kingdom was usurped by that demon when my friend Thomas was possessed by that demon, and everyone turned against me. In fact, I was exiled from my own kingdom by my own dad. Now, based on my diligent research, I have a better solution for you. Some of the council members leaned in, interest peaking, now changed from annoyance to genuine interest. One man was still annoyed, a skeptical man by nature, with an even sterner expression. He could not stop himself from mocking the wayward prince. Oh, do tell, your royal highness. Is your grand solution to trap the demon in a bottle and cast him into the ocean? The room erupted in raucous laughter as the man's playful retort to the wayward prince, but the prince was unfazed and maintained his cheeky demeanor and tone. Bard Prophet was the only serious soul in the room, trusting his years of friendship and experience with the wayward prince. He raised his hand and silenced the laughter and looked into the wayward prince's eyes, as one would look into the eyes of a dear friend. Enough, he said. Wayward Prince was a powerful ally in this war. We at least owe it to hear him. Everyone gave him his moment to speak his mind. Your rudeness betrays the lot of you. He addressed Wayward Prince now directly. I am willing to hear you. Do tell, what is your grand solution? The laughter died down, and all eyes were filled with anticipation and focused on Wayward Prince, eagerly awaiting his response. Wayward Prince paced the room, with a grin on his face, as he began to unravel his grand solution, unveiling it a piece at a time. My dear friends from across the world, assembled here at council, united by one idea and a belief in freedom, I thank you kindly for granting me this audience. The prince gave a proud bow and laughed when he spoke again, saying, In my travels I have come across a very powerful and largely unknown piece of magic. A spell, in fact. A spell that has the unique power to bind even the dreadful king to an amulet. Quite an ingenious solution, if I do say so myself. As he continued his presentation, the council members exchanged skeptical and embarrassed glances. They thought to themselves, who gave this fool the floor? This is a war council, not a circus. Despite the judgmental glances, the wayward prince continued his speech, unfazed by the judgmental glances. The wayward prince then began to describe the dangers of the spell, not realizing or not allowing himself to believe the truth that the members of the council were not even sold on the idea, despite the fact he kept no secrets about the dangers and side effects of the spell. This spell is not to be cast by the weak-minded or faint of heart. It is exceedingly dangerous and can only be performed by the most skilled casters. When it succeeds, it would cause the demon to be powerless and trapped in the amulet. As the wayward prince continued, he made fun of some of the members of the solemn council. He knew that it was probably a bad idea, but nonetheless his humor got the best of him, and he could not resist. Many of you might be a tad hesitant to try this dangerous spell. No need to fear. I am absolutely certain that our esteemed friend and member of the same council, Sir Doubts Every Word, will find some small place in his heart where he will unlock the courage to attempt this dangerous feat. He gave the man a direct but subtle mischievous wink, which caused the entire room to erupt in raucous laughter again. The wayward prince continued with his obnoxious jokes, causing the mood in the room to be the opposite of serious, the opposite of what the council was meant to be, because of the utterly serious topic at hand. And if Sir Doubts Every Word finds the idea too daunting, I am absolutely sure that ladies too scared to try will take up the immensely difficult task, he said, looking indirectly at another council member, issuing a playful smirk. The council members could not stop themselves from chuckling, as the wayward prince's wit and his humorous tone softening even their tense expressions. Despite the unusual tone in the room, Bard Prophet was unfazed and was completely focused on the task at hand, inquiring directly at the wayward prince in a more serious tone for more information. May I remind you, friend, that this is a war council. You must tell us more of the spell. How can we be certain that it will work? And work as advertised at that? And what are the other risks involved in performing it? He said the words while searching the prince's eyes for any sign of possible doubt. The wayward prince, too, reckoning the severity of the situation, grew more serious as well, his playful demeanor fading away, for now as he was prepared to address the serious concerns. The wayward prince drew in a deep breath as he began to answer the questions in a more somber tone. The spell I refer to is known only as the Binding of the Tormentor. It is an ancient and mighty incantation that has been used perhaps 7 times in the long and bitter history of our world. Each time it was cast, there were consequences, severe ones. He paused for a moment as he allowed the council members to understand and contemplate upon his words, allowing them to truly ingest them. This spell requires the greatest focus, unbridled strength, and immense knowledge of the arts of magic. This spell cannot be learned in a single night, that is for sure. It is not a task to be taken lightly. This spell will bend the very fabric of our existence, time and space itself, allowing for a rift in the spiritual world that will bind the essence of a spirit, in our case a very wicked demon, to a physical object, and in our case an amulet. The wayward prince made a gesture toward a small, intricately designed amulet which he had placed at the center of a table when he entered the room. The reason why was now explicitly clear. The risks involved in casting this spell are severe for the caster, specifically on the body and spirits. Those who attempt the spell will suffer great spiritual and physical pain even without making a mistake. A mistake, however, could either destroy the caster or trap them within the amulet instead, in rare cases, mind you. It is more common for the caster to simply drop dead, with no fancy lights or sparks or visible display of magic ever occurring. This is why only a skilled mage can cast it, and their concentration should not be broken during the casting process. The council members exchanged nervous glances. Their concerns were more evident with each word the wayward prince uttered. This was seen in the pursed lips and furrowed brows that now filled the room. The wayward prince arose with the lifting up of his voice, sensing their nervousness, attempted to ease the apprehension in the room with words of reassurance. Despite these great risks, I believe this spell is our only real hope of containing the dreadful king. The hope for destroying him is utterly lost. A tear welled up in the prince's eyes. My daughter has paid the price already. But in this present matter, we must always weigh the risks against the mighty threat that the eighth king of hell poses to our world. If we succeed, we will save countless lives and prevent hell on earth from re-emerging. If he possesses another body, I can assure you personally that the second suffering will be worse than the first. The wayward prince scanned the room. His eyes met each of the esteemed members of the council one at a time. I am ready to take on this ultimate responsibility, but I will not do it alone. I need the faith, help, and support of this council and the courage of the free world. Together we realize how precious our world is and save it from any darkness that threatens it, waiting to consume it completely. Bard Prophet, inspired by the words of his dear friend, arose from his seat. His piercing gaze was fixed on the prince. Your plan is risky but bold and courageous. It contains the spark of the courage it contains the spark of courage this world needs. So many other worlds have been completely consumed without it. But I believe it is the best option we have in our most dire need. If only all men and women had the courage that you have, and the initiative to make these decisions, and your willingness to put yourself last to save others, but first in the line of danger. Bard Prophet's voice failed to waver as he spoke these words in support of the wayward prince. However, you have also detailed how dangerous a spell can be, in that it requires extensive knowledge of the arcane arts. I've committed my entire life to studying these very mysteries in more than one universe, and in my travels have unlocked secrets that few have even theorized about. It is my very duty as a mage and a protector of our realm, our precious world, to take on this responsibility and cast the binding of the tormentor myself. The council members gazed at Bard Prophet with a mix of surprise, awe, and trepidation. The wayward prince was caught off guard by his sudden willingness to agree and cast the spell, but he knew that his voice would sway the rest of the council in his favor. The wayward prince, though surprised still by the declaration, nodded in agreement, saying, "Your wisdom and expertise are unmatched, Bard Prophet. You should be the one to attempt this spell. I would not trust anyone else but you." As the council members slowly began to agree and assent to Bard Prophet's plan to cast a spell, the wayward prince suggested, Bard Prophet said, "We have to prepare for this ritual with all possible care, making sure we have all possible safeguards in place. This will only succeed with your support, wayward prince, as well as the support of the entire council to see this through. The fate of our worlds depend on it." At this, the wayward prince's cheeky demeanor returned to his countenance, and he smiled at the Bard Prophet, saying, "Of course, dear friend, you have always had my undying support, and I'm confident that the rest of the Sacred Council will also support you with the same devotion, and they would all love to see your work and your famous magic tricks." The members of the council began to discuss the intricate details of what would be needed to see this plan through, with the knowledge that the fate of the world was on the line, and that one mistake in the process could lead to unprecedented disaster. Whatever the case was, Wayward Prince knew that the world was in uncharted territory. Bard Prophet and Wayward Prince began to go back and forth, ironing out the specific details of the plan. As they bantered at points, there were chuckles from the crowd members as Wayward Prince made the occasional joke despite the severity of the situation the world found themselves in. But there was a unity in the room, which would not have been possible unless they had been faced with such a terrible threat. After the war against this demon, people from all nations had come together to fight him. And the leaders of the peoples knew that they would not rest until the job was done, and the dreadful king would no longer serve as a threat to their world. Left unchecked, the dreadful king would diligently seek control of all worlds in order to enslave them. Then we change the scene again to the Dominion of the Broken Cross world, Ontario. Christian was thrust awake from his vivid dreams, nightmares. He knew it had been too long since his dreams had actually brought him a pleasant feeling. In these nightmares, he was always being chased by some unseen force. The images from his nightmares continued to linger. It would ruminate and swell in his mind, and he knew if left unchecked, they would completely destroy him. The prior dreams he had still lingered in his mind, the words of the teacher, a hope he could not escape from, even now in this world which he knew was ruled by devils. His reality was completely controlled by the Dominion, and the strings were pulled by a group of religious fanatical authorities known as the Magisterium. He missed the warmth and peace of the words of the teacher from his dream, brought to his mind. Nothing else would calm his mind, but he was unsure of where the vision came from, and something told him it was all a lie. But then the thought of how he could have envisioned such specific details, and when he was dreaming it, it was not like a dream, but almost lifelike. It was only waking that distorted his memories to make him question them. He carried a weight on his shoulders, now over a significance he could not describe. He yearned for the freedom and the blessed hope that the teacher seemed to offer. As Christian stepped outside, he heard the faint, fanatical preaching of the magisterium priests, booming and filling his ears with unwelcome promises of fire and brimstone for those who rejected their doctrines. For the first time in his life, after hearing these voices, he shuddered, a mix of disgust and fear tumbling through his spine. He thought deeply about their doctrines and the unquestioned authority people gave to them. An iron and unstoppable cruel grip hovered over the people who were once free. Christian had not remembered freedom. Canada was conquered a few years after his birth, but nonetheless he felt the ache in his bones to return to an earlier time, a simpler life which was all ruined by religious fanaticism and control. Christian continued to walk through the dirty streets towards the train to the labor camp. His body ached the moment he realized that he was headed to another day of back-breaking work, constructing the monument to Peter. He felt an overwhelming sense of despair falling over him the moment he saw those ominous gates of the camp as he exited the train, reminding him of the hopelessness he experienced, in that there is never any escape from reality except perhaps in dreams. But could he consider even that to truly be an escape? He joined the line of weary workers who poured through the gates, flooding into the camp. As he walked in, he closed his eyes for 5 seconds, trying to envision the memory of his dreams and the heart of the teacher's message. All he knew was that the only reality that awaited him was that of the overwhelming presence of the Dominion. The authority of this government felt alien to him, as if it did not even belong in his world, as if they were invaders not only to his nation but to the universe itself, unwelcome invaders and destroyers. He had hope in his veins that somehow he might be able to seize freedom, which was taken from him, before he had the opportunity to experience it. But in his heart, he knew that it belonged to him, but he could only long to have it again. Then we switch scenes to the same world, same universe, the Dominion of the Broken Cross universe, but this is in New York instead. Natalie Gabler, a woman with a fiery heart and a passion, and red hair and green eyes, walked closely ahead of her dear friends through the winding and twisted streets of what was once New York City. The 5 of them moved silently and were careful to avert away from any unnecessary attention. The watchful eyes and spies of the magisterium were everywhere, and one wrong move could lead to their prosecution and deaths. A gathering for what Natalie planned to do was expressly forbidden. The risks were immense. Therefore, they would eliminate any chance of being discovered. As they continued to walk, they suddenly arrived at an abandoned building, which had once been an old apartment complex. Its towering shadow over the city provided homes for people living in a better life in an old world. They descended down a long winding staircase to find a hidden basement. As the companions began to settle and to get used to their environment in the dimly lit basement, Natalie retrieved a small and intricately designed device from her bag. It was a Lothan, a magical artifact that would temporarily but completely and unreliably shield them from the dreadful king and his demonic activity and servants. Natalie took a few moments to set it up and install the device in the room. Her hands trembled as she activated it, and she soon felt the slow buzzing of the magical field that began to envelope them, providing them much-needed relief. knowing that their actions would be invisible to any spiritual force that sought to spy on them. The room was now illuminated by the subtle and faint glow of the Lothan. The friends gathered around Natalie as she confidently informed them that their device was doing its job and that they were now safe from the whims of the enemy. She looked at their faces, each illuminated by the light of the Lothan. She knew they had hope in their eyes, and the anticipation in their hearts began to grow. They gathered around Natalie as she unfurled a tattered manuscript. The pages were worn out after long years of use and long years of neglect. It was the work of their universe's version of Shakespeare, a master playwright and poet, who had been executed by the magisterium when they seized control and absolute power and political power over England when they conquered the nation in the 1500s. His words were viewed as extremely dangerous, as they were opposed to the regime that sought to control the souls of everyone and every other aspect of their lives, both secular and spiritual. Natalie began to read the poem, hoping to offer inspiration to her friends. Weary with toil, I haste me to my bed, to dear repose for limbs with travel tired. But then begins a journey in my head, to work my mind when body's work expired. For then my thoughts from far where I abide intend a zealous pilgrimage to thee, and keep my drooping eyelids open wide, looking on darkness which the blind do see. Save that my soul's imaginary sight presents thy shadow to my sightless view, which like a jewel hung in ghastly night, makes black night beauteous in her old face anew. Lo, thus by day my limbs, by night my mind for thee, and for myself no quiet find. As Natalie echoed the final line, reading it aloud from the manuscript, her voice was filled with emotion and unmatched passion. Her friends listened with rapt attention, some hearing these words for the very first time. The words of this long-dead poet had a life of their own, that even the magisterium could not completely destroy despite all of their book burnings. Here in this moment, all that mattered was the friends who were completely together, reading and expressing the life of the words. The words served as the best escape they could get from their day-to-day lives under a blood-red sky. Natalie closed her eyes and envisioned a world where she could freely breathe and freely express herself, and where beautiful things were cherished and not persecuted. And she dared even to envision the final overthrow and defeat of the Dominion, a retaking of their world. But they knew that due to the unreliability of the Lothans' magic, that their time was limited. When the Lothans' protection would fade, they would find themselves in a world again where they could not freely speak their true minds on anything, always under the twisted and watchful gaze of the spiritual eyes of the magisterium. They stored the verses in their hearts, savoring every last word, a certain hope that and rebellion that even the greatest darkness could not extinguish. The room was silent for half a minute, as Natalie continued to gaze into the eyes of the faces of her friends around her. There was a fire inside her that moved her toward action, even in a world where almost every move was closely monitored by forces she did not comprehend, but was a constant abiding presence of unmistakable malice. The words of Shakespeare echoed in her heart, just as they had echoed off the walls of the room. She was compelled to move as if by a Holy Spirit. She took a deep breath and began to address her friends. Tonight, the light of the world was fading. She looked up and gave a subtle smile. But when the light is quenched completely, it will be resurrected by words, even amidst the uncertainty that floods the world. A subtle, silent wind speaks to us of words, of worlds away, and of the overthrow of tyrants. The force of the sword cannot rule forever against the saber of truth, cutting through all things, while the things that the darkness hides will not be hidden long, because the shadows decay until all that is left is what is undeniably visible, from which no one can hide from at all. We do not have much time left to speak, but my love and my thoughts will always be with you all who stand with me. As the light of the Lothan began to fade away into the shadows, the silent terror filled Natalie's hearts. There was a presence, a weight against her, her heart to change the world, or at least to escape it, and never see her world again. She and her friends were fully committed and were ready to sacrifice everything to find what they were looking for. As they gathered their things and left, Natalie clicked the button on the Lothan, and it let out an exhausting, quiet shriek as the light suddenly was extinguished. She both dreaded returning to her day-to-day life and also knew that the Dominion, though seemingly unstoppable, would have its downfall, and she would be the catalyst, the savior and mother and protector of the world from forces that no one had ever dared to challenge. The path ahead would be filled with danger and uncertainty, but even the loneliness of the world, she knew she was not alone. There were angels out there, a guide for her feet and a light for her path, illuminated by dreams and flashes of lightning, meeting the waters and mighty tidal waves of the storm of the worlds. And that's the end of chapter 1. You can expect probably weekly episodes of me reading these chapters, one chapter at a time. So we just read chapter 1, and next week at the same time you'll probably see chapter 2. I do appreciate any comments you leave at the description. I know it can be a little bit tedious listening to someone read a book for half an hour, but anyway, the print book will be, once all these recordings are done, the print book will come out. And hope you enjoyed. Have a great rest of your day, and really appreciate all of you. Thank you.